The battle had ended, but the scent of charred metal and scorched flesh still hung thick in the air. The ruins of what was once an alien stronghold lay in smoldering heaps, the remnants of a brutal conflict between the Dominion and the invading human forces. The sky, tinged with hues of violet and crimson, bore witness to the aftermath, a graveyard of broken ships and fallen warriors. Sergeant Doran Hayes moved through the battlefield with calculated steps, his rifle lowered but not forgotten. The war had taken its toll on him. Scars marred his body, but it was the unseen ones that hurt the most. He had seen too many allies fall, heard too many cries of agony echo through the cosmos. War was not noble. It was necessity, a struggle for survival in an uncaring universe. As he stepped over the remains of a crushed exosuit, his visor detected a faint life signature ahead. Most would have ignored it. Protocol dictated that injured enemy combatants were to be left behind, a burden no one could afford to carry. But something about this reading made him pause. He found the source soon enough. A towering figure lay collapsed between the wreckage of a Dominion war mech, its deep cerulean skin glistening under the weak sunlight. The alien's armor was cracked, revealing sinewy muscle beneath. Its species was known as the Thrall, a warrior race that had long opposed humanity's expansion. Their soldiers were feared for their unbreakable resolve, their ruthlessness in battle. But this one was different. Doran knelt, gripping the hilt of his knife in case the Thrall attempted to lash out. But there was no fight left in the alien. Its golden eyes flickered, unfocused, its breath shallow. A deep wound marred its back, just beneath the twin ridges of bone protruding from its shoulders. More importantly, Doran noticed the Thrall's lower body was motionless. Paralyzed. The realization struck him like a bullet to the chest. A warrior unable to move, unable to fight to them, it was a fate worse than death. Dominion forces wouldn't come back for a cripple. Hell, even humans barely rescued their own wounded unless they were useful. The war machine had no room for the weak. He should leave. Shouldering a burden like this was suicide. But as he looked into those golden eyes, something in him twisted. The Thrall was barely hanging on, clinging to the last shreds of life. It wasn't begging, wasn't even speaking. It had already resigned itself to death. And that was the part that made him sick to his stomach. Doran cursed under his breath. "You lucky bastard," he muttered, shifting to lift the alien onto his back. The Thrall let out a strangled grunt, too weak to protest. "I'm either the dumbest man in the galaxy or the only one with a damn conscience." The weight was immense, nearly crushing, but Doran forced himself to move. He had faced worse. He would get them both out of here. Somehow. As he trudged through the battlefield, his comm crackled to life. "Sergeant Hayes, report. Status." It was Captain Rylance, his commanding officer. "ETA back to extraction?" Doran hesitated. If he told them about the Thrall, command would order him to abandon it. He knew how this worked. He had seen what happened to soldiers who disobeyed direct orders. "Got delayed," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Found something interesting. Need a few minutes. Be quick. We're not waiting forever." The connection cut, and Doran pushed forward, heart pounding. He could still make it. He just had to find a way to smuggle a half-dead enemy onto a human transport without getting shot for treason. Easy, right? A faint sound drew his attention. The Thrall was looking at him now, confusion in its fading gaze. And then, in a voice rough with pain, it spoke. "Why?" Doran exhaled, adjusting his grip. "Hell if I know. Guess I just hate seeing people die when they don't have to." The Thrall made no response, but something flickered in its gaze. Not gratitude. Not yet. But something close. And so, step by step, Sergeant Doran Hayes carried the weight of a dying enemy into the unknown, knowing full well that this decision would change everything. Doran Hayes staggered under the immense weight of the Thrall warrior as he made his way through the ruins of the battlefield. The air was thick with the scent of burning fuel and charred flesh, a grim reminder that he was still deep in enemy territory. His every step was a gamble, his every breath a prayer that no wandering patrols would spot him. The Thrall's breathing had grown shallower, but its golden eyes still flickered with a faint ember of awareness. Doran knew he didn't have much time. If he didn't find a way to stabilize the alien soon, it would die before he ever reached extraction. He ducked behind a half-destroyed wall, adjusting his grip on the alien's form. His comm crackled again. "Hayes, what's your status?" "We're moving soon." Captain Rylance's voice was edged with impatience. Doran's mind raced. "Got a minor injury. Needed to patch myself up. ETA 5 minutes. A pause. Then, make it 3. We're not waiting for stragglers." Doran cursed under his breath and cut the transmission. He had no time to waste. He glanced down at the Thrall. It was barely clinging on, its body motionless but eyes tracking him with weary suspicion. "All right, big guy," Doran muttered. "Let's get you out of here." With sheer willpower, he pushed forward, weaving through the debris. The extraction point wasn't far now. He could see the faint glow of human transports idling in the distance, waiting for the last of their forces to board. But there was a problem. Between him and salvation stood a squad of human soldiers, scanning the ruins with precision rifles. If they spotted him carrying an enemy combatant, they wouldn't ask questions, they'd shoot first. Doran's mind raced. He could try to explain, but the chances of them understanding were slim. No one wanted to bring a wounded Thrall onto a human ship. The alien stirred slightly in his arms, a faint growl escaping its lips. Doran felt the tension in its body. It knew the danger as well as he did. "Listen," Doran whispered. "If you make a sound, we're both dead. Just hold on." The Thrall's golden eyes locked onto his. Then, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, it went limp in his arms. Doran took a deep breath and stepped forward. The nearest soldier turned, rifle aimed. "Sergeant Hayes. What the hell are you carrying?" Doran forced a grimace, adjusting his grip. "Prisoner. Still alive. Command might want intel." The soldier frowned. "Since when do we take Thralls alive?" Doran didn't hesitate. "Since I said so. Now let me through before we all get left behind." The soldier hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Get to the transport. But command's gonna have questions." Doran didn't wait for more discussion. He pressed forward, moving quickly up the ramp of the waiting ship. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the doors hissed shut behind him. The Thrall let out a weak exhale, its body sagging against Doran's. "You're safe," Doran muttered. "For now." But he knew this was only the beginning. The interior of the transport ship hummed with low vibrations as it ascended from the scorched battlefield. Doran Hayes slumped against the cold metal wall, his heart still pounding. The Thrall warrior lay beside him, its breath shallow but steady. It had made it this far, but that didn't mean they were safe. Across the bay, a medic was staring at him, gaze bouncing between him and the unconscious alien. She frowned and took a cautious step forward. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, pulling out her scanner. "You actually brought a Thrall on board?" Doran clenched his jaw. He was exhausted, but he wasn't about to start explaining himself to every skeptical face on the ship. "It's wounded. I couldn't just leave it." The medic exhaled sharply, as if deciding whether this was worth her time. Then she knelt beside the alien, running a diagnostic scan. A faint beeping sound filled the cargo bay. "Paralyzed from the lower spine down," she said after a few seconds. "Internal damage is severe, but it's stable for now." She turned her gaze to Doran. "I don't know what you're planning, but command's not going to like this." Doran already knew that. As the ship continued its ascent, he could feel the weight of his decision pressing against him. His comm buzzed again. This time, it wasn't his captain. "Sergeant Hayes," a cold voice filtered through. "Report to the briefing chamber immediately." Doran sighed. The voice belonged to Colonel Garrick, a man known for his ruthlessness. He glanced at the Thrall, then back at the medic. "Watch it," he said. "Don't let anyone touch it." The medic nodded, her curiosity outweighing her distaste. Doran straightened, wiped the blood off his forehead, and made his way toward the command deck. The briefing chamber was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just left behind. Colonel Garrick stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze razor-sharp as Doran entered. Beside him, Captain Rylance had a grim expression. You care to explain what the hell you were thinking, Sergeant? Garrick's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the menace behind it. Doran remained standing. I wasn't going to let a wounded warrior die when I had the means to save it. Garrick's lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smirk. You realize this isn't just a warrior, don't you? Doran frowned. What do you mean? The colonel tapped a button on the console, bringing up a holographic profile. A Thrall face filled the air, identical to the one Doran had carried off the battlefield. This isn't just some random soldier, Garrick continued. This is HFY, a high-ranking Thrall commander. Doran's stomach dropped. He had heard the name before. HFY was a known war leader, responsible for some of the Dominion's most ruthless campaigns. The kind of enemy that no human soldier would willingly bring aboard. You just brought a war criminal onto our ship. Garrick's eyes gleamed with cold amusement. So tell me, Sergeant, what are we supposed to do with it? Doran hesitated. His instincts had told him to save the alien, but now he was facing consequences he hadn't anticipated. The Dominion left him to die, he said slowly. That means he's no longer useful to them. That also means he might be useful to us. Garrick studied him for a long moment. You want to interrogate him? I want to know why they abandoned him, Doran countered. He was one of their best. If they left him behind, there's a reason. Garrick exchanged a glance with Rylance, then exhaled through his nose. Fine. You've got 24 hours. If he doesn't give us something useful by then. Doran knew what the unspoken words meant. He nodded. Understood. As he turned to leave, his mind swirled with questions. Why had the Dominion forsaken one of their best warriors? And more importantly, what would HFY do when he woke up? HFY awoke slowly, his body numb, his senses dulled. The sterile lights overhead were a stark contrast to the battlefield he last remembered. He was alive, but in unfamiliar territory. His golden eyes adjusted, and then he saw the human. Sergeant Doran Hayes sat across from him, arms crossed, gaze unreadable. There was no weapon drawn, no hostility. Just quiet observation. HFY tried to move, but the weight of his paralysis reminded him of his reality. Shame and fury burned beneath his skin. A warrior unable to fight was no warrior at all. Why did you save me? His voice was hoarse, laced with the remnants of battle. Doran didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because you were left behind. And because you deserved better than dying alone in the dirt. HFY's mandibles twitched. I am Dominion. I am your enemy. Doran let out a slow breath. Not anymore. Your people abandoned you. They saw you as expendable. I don't. Silence settled between them. HFY had been loyal to the Dominion for years, had led countless battles in their name. And yet, at the first sign of weakness, they had discarded him like debris. That truth cut deeper than any blade. Doran stood. I made a deal with my commanding officers. You're not a prisoner. You're free to leave. HFY's eyes narrowed in suspicion. And if I stay? Doran shrugged. That's up to you. I think you have a lot more to offer than just being another body on a battlefield. The offer hung in the air. The idea of freedom was foreign to HFY. His entire existence had been dictated by war, by duty. He had never been given a choice. For the first time, he had one now. Days passed. HFY remained aboard, speaking little but watching everything. He saw how humans treated their wounded, how they valued those who could no longer fight. It was so different from the Dominion. They had honor, but it wasn't based on how many enemies they had slain. It was in how they protected their own. Doran had given him time, space to decide his own fate. And in that time, HFY realized that perhaps his purpose was no longer with the Dominion. His body was broken, but his mind was sharp. There was strength beyond the battlefield. And so, when Doran asked him again what he wanted to do, HFY made his decision. I will stay. Doran smiled. Good. I think you'll fit in just fine. For the first time in his life, HFY wasn't bound by orders or expectations. He was something new. And in that freedom, he found something greater than war, he found purpose. Moral true strength is not just in battle but in the choices we make beyond it. Mercy, loyalty, and the ability to see value where others do not, these are the virtues that define true warriors. Sometimes, the greatest battles are not fought with weapons, but with compassion and understanding.